So the basic concept of this coil is that you have two wires running in parallel, and both of those wires have been wrapped with a much smaller gauge of wire around the outside. So each one of these little wraps is actually two wires inside of there. We're going to call this the fused Clapton. I talked to the two people that were the first ones that I saw doing this. It's Roddy Scoots, ECV, over on Instagram, and also Squid Dude. That's DJ and Ryan. They're both really awesome coil builders. I would suggest checking out their Instagram, and I linked to their Instagrams down below. And also need to give credit. I also talked it over with Derek Small. He's the first person to do a Clapton coil, the inventor of the Clapton coil, and all of them agreed that fused Clapton would be a good name for this. So it's the fused Clapton coil, which is just two parallel wires on the inside, wrapped Clapton with a smaller gauge of wire. And I used 36 gauge around the outside of this coil. I chose the smallest gauge of wire I could find because like a lot of times Clapton coils will take a long time to ramp up, and the reason for that is that this outside wire is not really doing much electrically. Like this 36 gauge wire going around here is probably like 20 or 30 ohms or something. So it's really that inner wire that's doing all the work of heating up. So that's why a lot of times Claptons will take a real long time to heat up, because the outside wire is just absorbing the heat from that internal wire and taking a long time to finally, ramp up to a point where it's going to create a lot of thick vapor. That's why I went with the thinnest wire I could find, because it's going to have kind of a negligible effect on the ramp up time of the other wire. And on the inside I used nichrome 80 because it's a real low resistance wire that heats up quickly, so it's kind of the opposites of each spectrum in this coil. And you'll notice the ramp up time is almost instantaneous. And a real cool thing about this too is that you got juice channels on the inside here, because underneath here there's a groove between those two internal wires, and there are spaces where juice can flow into the internal wires here. Like between the 36 gauge all along here has little spaces, and juice can just get right in there. I'll actually just show you what happens when you put some juice on this thing. Let me see if I can get it on there. See, that just absorbed it right in. It can hold like a lot of juice. And then when you hit the button, there we go, finally reached saturation there. And when you hit the button, the internal wire heats up really quickly, and then vapor just shoots out of these little slots in the 36, and so that kind of cools off the vapor as it comes out, but you still get the same amount of vapor that you would with that lower ohm, just a cooler vape. So this single coil came out to 0.21, and I would fire it right now, but it's going to get my lens covered in juice, so I'm not going to. Okay, this build is on the Mutation X. It has those big post holes. I was able to fit dual coils into the stock post holes, which is convenient. And I ended up dualing it for myself just because I prefer much warmer vapor. And a single coil came out to 0.21. The dual ended up at 0.13 is what the ohm meter said. And I used to just not even care what ohms my coils were, because I had accidentally hard shorted, VTC4s and MNKs, the 18650s, like right in my hand, and nothing happened to the batteries. They just got really hot, and no structural changes at all. So I thought I had this false sense of security until I saw that video, which some of you guys probably saw on Facebook or YouTube, of that guy hard shorting that 26650 MNKE, and it just exploded like really violently. And this kind of made me a little bit more cautious. So it came out to 0.13 ohms. That's why I really like these parallel box mods, because you got two 18650s in there and it splits the amp draw between the two batteries. So it adds a degree of safety. And I just made this myself. I'm not into making box mods for sale. just because to me it's kind of a pain and takes the fun out of it. But actually the inventor of the Clapton Coil, Derek Small, I noticed recently on Facebook he did start selling these. Last time I saw it was $100 for an unregulated box mod. So I'll show you some vapor production. Yeah, this really burns through juice pretty quickly. It's very effective the coil is really effective at absorbing a lot of juice into the juice channels. I did the math on the 36 gauge wire. It's 33 ohms per foot, and there's about 6 feet of 36 gauge in each coil, so I mean it's over 100 ohms in each coil. And so I learned a lot making this video because I was so used to making the dual coils and splitting the resistance in half. I didn't realize that you can never get the resistance higher than the lowest resistance coil. So that internal parallel 24 gauge nichrome 80, you know, each coil is about 0.2 something ohms, and so you're never, no matter how much of that higher resistance 36 gauge is added to it, it's never going to be able to make that resistance any higher. So the 36 gauge literally is just like almost a heat sink for that vapor shooting out of it. It distributes the flavor and the heat from the vapor really well. I've been loving this coil so far. And so for a 0.13 ohm coil, I mean, it cools it down quite a bit. And you know, you can build this however you want. You can use 32 gauge around the outside if that's what you have, or 34 gauge. Just remember, as you go up in the gauge or thicker in that Clapton, and the wire on the outside, it's going to increase the ramp up time and make it heat up a little bit more slowly. And it's also going to create a little bit, not quite as fine of the vapor channels for that vapor to shoot out of. I'm going to post a few of these on eBay. I'm trying to raise some money because I'm going to be designing my own atomizer and I need to fund that. So I'm probably going to make the listing something like Fused Clapton by Twisted Messes or something. So if you wanted to check that out, it should be up on eBay fairly soon. And if you don't have an Instagram account, I'd recommend getting one, just because it's the coolest platform I've seen so far for coil building, because you can look back at the history of these builders and see the progression along, you know, as they get better and better, and it's really interesting. And that's honestly where I get the most inspiration for these coils. The most of the ideas come from other builders I see on Instagram. It's a great community. I've linked to those two people who I saw do this kind of coil first. And so I hope you enjoy the build video. Okay, for this build video you're going to need some stuff. I'm going to be using 24 gauge nichrome 80, and I got this at lightningvapes.com. It's a really good deal on this stuff. Well, in my opinion, it's like $10 for 100 feet of 24 gauge. It's low resistance wire. And then I got some from Temco, 36 gauge Canthal. Very, very thin wire, and also pretty inexpensive. You're going to need some pliers, some clippers. You do well with an extra set of pliers just to untwist the wire and straighten it out at the end. And you're going to need a drill for sure. So to get started, I'm just going to grab off a piece of this 24 gauge nichrome 80. Pull it off and then clip it off. And then just stick that right into the chuck of the drill. And we're just going to straighten this out. So just pull it taut and spin it up. Yeah, that's enough. Cool thing about nichrome 80 is that it's really soft, but once you straighten it out like this, it holds its shape really well. And so later on when we're building the actual coil with this, you'll see why it's really convenient. But I've already prepared a few of these strands previously, just to make the video a little bit easier. So you're going to straighten out 2 of those pieces, and just that one length off of the spool, just one wrap off, is perfect size to make a dual coil with this stuff. So it kind of works out. All I'm going to do is grab these completely parallel, so get them straightened out as closely as possible. Grab the end, leave about 1 inch or so. Doesn't have to be exact on this part. And then just hand twist these, just like the spiral wire or the zipper coil. Let's zoom in there. And it doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to give the chuck of the drill something to hold on to. Go ahead and clip this off here. And you stick the twisted portion into the chuck of the drill. Now for the 36 gauge wire, and once you get it like this, sometimes it likes to get misaligned. And you can kind of just bend them, figure out how to bend them just to get them straightened up a little bit better. With the 36 gauge, you're going to need about, I don't know, for this length of wire, probably about 15 feet of this stuff. So to make it a little bit easier to work with, because if you just pull a whole bunch of this off, it gets all tangled up and stuff. What I like to do is I actually take one end of the wire, I tie it around something nice and heavy, like a doorknob, and then I unspool a whole bunch of it, and then while holding tension on this part and kind of holding my finger on the wire that's going off to the doorknob, you just give it a tug. Just a nice firm pull. If you pull it too hard and it breaks, it's not really a big deal because it's going to straighten the wire out anyway. But you just get a nice firm pull, and then you can just clip it off, and that straightens the wire out really well and makes it a lot easier to work with to make the Clapton coil. So I'm just going to grab the wire that I had done that previously to. And I'm not even sure if this stuff is so thin. See if you can even see it on the video. And the benefit to that, I might have already mentioned it earlier, but is that the wire itself, anytime you make a Clapton, that wire around the outside is not really doing much electrically for the resistance. And so the smaller or thinner it is, the less mass it has, and the less effect it'll have on the ramp up time of the actual coil. So that's why I like to use the 36 gauge for this, just because it makes it almost negligible as far as ramp up time. And you'll see that later, or maybe you already did. But all you want to do to make a Clapton coil is go ahead and stick this wire down into that little area where the chuck of the drill is. And I'm going to turn the drill clockwise just because that's what I'm used to doing. So once it's down in there, you just hold just a little bit of tension here on this lead wire, and you start spinning it up. And you just let it get caught, and it'll start wrapping around that wire there. And at the beginning, if it's overlapping, don't worry about it. It's pretty hard to get it perfect just from the start. So you can just keep going with it. And see how it just, you probably didn't see actually because it's not zoomed in. But if it starts going back over at the beginning part, don't worry about it. Just keep going forward. And the best way to do this is just to find the groove where this wire wants to go in. Hold it pretty tightly, and then just as it wraps around, it's going to lead itself up that wire. So try your best to just relax your hands as much as possible and your arms, and this wire will actually just kind of wrap itself. This is going to take a bit of practice if you've never made a Clapton coil before. So yeah, it really just takes a little bit of practice and frustration. So see how it started overlapping there? All I do is I reverse that drill, hold tension on the wire like this, and just start undrilling it, unscrewing it. And it just unwraps that portion once I get it back to aligned and going in the right direction. I just go ahead and start again. There we go. Right, and so I wouldn't suggest going that fast when you first start, but I was just for an example of how fast you can get it eventually once you get into that groove. And so yeah, it looks like that used only about 12 feet or so of this 36 gauge, and I'll go ahead and pause the video and show you a macro shot of this. Okay, so this is the beginning of that wire. You can see the twisted portion, and then the beginning of that Clapton. It's not perfect, but that's okay, because as you go, it's going to even out quite a bit once you get into that consistent groove. And so I'll just show you this length of wire here. I can get it in view. And it'll have those twists in it naturally, which is totally fine, because we're going to untwist those. But you can see here the basic concept of this wire already. It's that you have those two parallel wires, and so with this wire wrapped around it, it ends up with a juice channel down inside of that wire on the middle, and juice can pretty easily flow right into this Clapton coil. It can get between those crevices and fill that inside juice channel. And so when you hit the button on your mod, it actually under pressure just forces that juice, forces the vapor out. And since it's coming out of all those little slots, and that wire itself is not actually heating up, it's the internal wires that are doing all the work, so it cools off the vapor, and so you can get a lot of cooler than usual vapor at the ohms, but still has the same amount of vapor. And the flavor is just it's real crazy. It's great stuff. So I'll show you the next step here, and then we'll go on to building the coil. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a better idea what this wire, a basic concept of what it should look like and kind of how it works. And what I like to do is grab my clippers and just cut off these ends that weren't perfect. And then the end there where it bunched up, I'm going to go ahead and clip that off too. And before we start wrapping the coil, you saw in the macro shot how this is all twisted up. Just has a real slight twist to it. So all I'm going to do is grab a couple pairs of pliers, and I'm using these nylon pliers. It's not necessary. I just like to, well, I don't know. I like to have extra protection against the wire, that Clapton wire breaking on me. And so I just grab that portion, you bend it over, and that Nichrome 80 holds its shape really well once it's straightened out like that. And these Clapton wires are actually pretty tight around there, and so you can just bend it right back into place till it's parallel, and then move on to the next section. Like when I first started making these, I was trying to straighten out that whole piece at the same time, and it starts kinking up and twisting in the opposite direction in certain places, and that's why I just have to do it little by little. But it's a pretty straightforward process. So I'll go ahead and get this straightened out. I'll pause it, and then I'll come back and build the coil. Okay, so once you have it all straightened out, it doesn't have to be perfect, because as you wrap in the coil, it's going to straighten out even more. But it gets a pretty uniform piece of wire. And so you got those two wires that are really nicely paralleled in there. You can see right here where part of that twist didn't get untwisted all the way, but it's not going to cause a problem because you can unwrap it as you go. Just wanted to kind of show you what that should look like after you're done straightening it out. We've got the wire all straightened out for the most part. Like you just saw, there's still a little bit of a curve left in it, but that's going to be okay. It doesn't have to be completely perfect because it will straighten out as we wrap the coil. So I like to keep this all one piece first, even if I'm going to do dual coils, just because I can use as much as I need, clip it off at the appropriate place, and still have the maximum amount of wire left over. So you just start just like anything else. This is a 3/32 size micro screwdriver, and that's probably, it's been my favorite size to wrap on for quite some time. And remember earlier I mentioned that this Nichrome 80, once it's straightened out like that, really holds its shape. Notice there's literally no spring back to this wire. So on that first wrap, you want to kind of bend it back and around as you pull it over for the second wrap. And do your best to get this as perfect as you can, because since the wire doesn't have any springiness to it, once it's set in place, it's kind of hard to adjust. I'm just going to do a 5 wrap. So far on the atomizers I've been using, a 5 wrap has come out to 0.26 to 0.28, or actually some of them came out to 0.2, so it really is going to vary depending on what your posts are made of on your atomizer and how many wraps you do, etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this off. And we should have just enough to do one more coil. And just keep it straight as you go. If you do notice a curve in the wire, you can hold it real tight with these fingers and force it down and into that flat shape. Let's see if I was right about having enough wire here. Yeah, it looks like it. Alrighty, so now we got 2 coils. Should be looking pretty much exactly the same, and I'll go ahead and show a macro shot of those guys. Get it just right. I mean, the wire holds its shape, and you can get them basically exactly the same as far as 2 coils and consistency. And you'll notice from this angle, it looks like just one solid piece of wire. But if you get the light at the right angle, you can see right through down to those parallel coils under there. And so that'll kind of give you a better idea of how the juice can just so easily go down and get into that juice channel in between both of those wires. So yep, that's basically what you should be looking at. Alright, and with these coils you can do that same thing that I showed with the Nichrome 80 Tiger wire, where you can grab both of these leads and grab them kind of as close to the coil as you can, and just give them a little bend, and that will hold their shape and make it a little bit easier to mount. We're just going to go ahead and stick this in there, and I'm just going to do a single coil on video as usual, just so I can show the resistance of one of these coils. And I'm just going to get that positioned. I don't want it too close to the posts, because I found the resistance starts to get pretty low. I don't want it so far away that it's going to be hitting the deck. There we go. I think this should be good. Tighten it down. And this is on the Mutation X. Kind of pulling it, make sure that I have it positioned where I want it. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of this, is that it's already in the perfect position there. And so I'm going to go ahead and clip off of these lead wires. Okay, I just want to show you one thing here. When you first fire this up, every time I've done it so far, it's going to have hot spots in weird areas. So see how it's heating up? I don't know if you can see that. In weird spots. So basically, in each place that it's getting those hot spots, like right here for example, and in the back there, all that means is that it's compressed in that area. So back here in the back, it's being pushed together ever so slightly more than in the front. So the electricity is actually shorting out through those back wires. So what you want to do is get it all evenly aligned, and get back in focus here. So all you do is pulse it a little bit, let go of the button, and stick your screwdriver back in, and just kind of wiggle it around. And that distributes the pressure a little bit more evenly. And you can still see a little bit of a hot spot there. So just wiggle it again. Try to get any of those wires that are pressed together to just let go of each other. Getting in the front a little bit there. And what you can also do is, since it's in front, that just means it's a little bit tight there in front, you can reach down behind and give the back of this coil just a little squeeze. There we go. So you'll notice how fast that heats up. And that's again because that inner wire is low resistance wire, so it heats up quickly, and then that outer wire has such a little amount of mass that it doesn't really affect it too much. So, alright, let me ohm this out. Okay, so I got the hotspots out, and this little E-Leaf ohm reader has been one of the most accurate that I've found, and it was only $10 on eBay. So, I'm kind of a fan of that guy. Let me click this on here. We're going at 0.21 ohm single coil. And so, I'm not going to actually dual this today because this should be just plenty. 0.21 on a single coil. And actually, let me pause it and I'll just go ahead and wick this up real quick and get it going. Okay, so I'm just going to wick this really quickly. And what I'm using is Japanese organic cotton. And this is from the Vaping Buddha. It's a San Francisco based vape shop. And owner's a real cool guy. He donated 15 packs of this for the build off contest that I hosted over on Instagram. So thank you very much for that, and I love this stuff. It's a little bit thinner than Kogendu, which I actually prefer because there's less wasted material and it's easier to work with. So I'm just going to cut off a little portion here. This is how I use Japanese organic cotton. It's for myself. And then I just separate a portion off of it. And I just roll this guy up. I'm actually going to use this other piece. And I just kind of roll it gently. Twist the one end. Stick it through. That's how I do it. It seems to have been working well for me. Everybody has their own little way that they like to wick, so whatever floats your boat there. Tuck this guy down into the juice well. And good to go. Well, I guess I should show you one more thing here. Just the ramp up time on this, just to show you how quick it is. Almost no delay. Yep. Nice little